Hello, and welcome to another marvelous video. We are back to discuss another origin story of another iconic comic book character. You should be familiar with the name of today's character in focus. After all, it is Captain Steve Rogers we're talking about, with a twist. Yeah, we're not talking about Captain America. On the contrary, we're talking about Hydra Supreme. If you think we've gone crazy, then you've come to the right place. He is Steve Rogers from an alternate universe in which he was brainwashed as a youngster by Hydra. We all love a good what-if situation, so sit back and get your snacks and refreshments ready. It's showtime. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The origin story of Hydra Supreme. The path to Steve Rogers becoming Hydra Supreme began long ago. To be specific, it started precisely in Rick Remender and Nick Klein's Captain America issue 21, released in 2014. In this issue, Steve faced off against a bad guy known as the Iron Nail. The villain successfully eliminated the super soldier serum from Steve's system completely. As a result, Steve lost his abilities and his body aged to 90 years, which was technically his actual age. But it didn't stop him. While Steve quit becoming Captain America after losing his super soldier powers, he remained active as the commander of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a few years. That finally came to an end in the 2016 comic book event titled Avengers Standoff. The narrative of Avengers Standoff revealed that Maria Hill and S.H.I.E.L.D. had established a community called Pleasant Hill. The residents of the little hamlet were all supervillains whose lives, identities, and memories had been wiped and transformed by Kobik, a sentient piece of the cosmic cube. Kobik was employed to create this flawless illusion, taking on the look of a tiny girl. But hell broke loose as the criminals regained their memories and identities. Soon, the Avengers and Sam Wilson, who was Captain America at the time, together with Bucky Barnes and Steve Rogers, engaged in a significant conflict with these criminals. Crossbones, however, badly thrashed old Steve Rogers during the combat, but Kobik utilized her abilities to transform Steve back into a super soldier before the supervillain could kill him. Steve regained his youth and assumed his full Captain America powers to the delight of all readers. Even though it wasn't made known then, Kobik hadn't brought the real Steve Rogers back. Instead, she had developed another personality for him. Readers later discovered that Kobik had actually been duped by the Red Skull into thinking Hydra was a force for good, so she altered Steve Rogers' timeline as a result when she returned him to his childhood. Even while Steve was still the greatest superhero in the world, he was an undercover operative for Hydra, who hid his true allegiances until the Captain America series in 2016, when he was finally prepared to act. As Steve returned to his childhood, a new timeline was created. In this timeline, young Steve Rogers first encountered Hydra when he was 6 years old in the year 1926, when his mother, Sarah, was led into a Hydra-run colony by high-ranking member Elisa Sinclair. Sarah sought to flee with Steve after Elisa murdered Sarah's violent husband, Joseph. Elisa confronted her before she got an opportunity, and Sarah appears to have perished in the subsequent melee when she struck her skull. Steve was then kidnapped and sent to the Keep, a Hydra training facility. Elisa backed him up, indicating he was the one they were looking for. Hydra Supreme major story arcs. The Brainwash. Despite his exceptional intellectual ability, Steve was rejected by his professors, Dr. Fenhoff and his contemporaries, due to his poor physical condition and susceptibility to illness. Hydra's initial attempts at brainwashing failed due to Steve's strong will. As a result, he was frequently thrown into solitary confinement and compelled to watch re-education videos. During one of Steve's several efforts to flee the Keep in 1934, he was persuaded to stay by Daniel Whitehall, the Kraken, who pushed Steve to prove himself and accept Hydra's values, to value unity above individualism, and to achieve outstanding leadership. After a year, Dr. Fenhoff began to accept Steve owing to his demonstrated leadership and devotion to Hydra's mission. Steve also met Helmut Zemo, who would later become his only friend. World at War. When World War II was about to break out, Hydra decided to join up with Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party in order to utilize them to their benefit. In 1940, Steve returned to the United States on a mission to enter the army and assassinate Abraham Erskine, the principal scientist of the Allies' Project Rebirth. After failing several times, Steve resorted to working at a restaurant frequented by Erskine in order to poison him. Erskine was drawn to Steve when General Chester Phillips recognized him from his several attempts to enroll and lauded his commitment to helping the war effort. Just as it looked like everything was going according to plan, a thief distracted Steve before he could poison Erskine. Steve tried to stop the thief but failed horribly and was beaten up as a result. Due to his bravery, Erskine chose Steve as the candidate for Project Rebirth's Super Soldier Serum. When Erskine called Rogers to dinner, Steve took advantage of the opportunity and attempted to shoot him. Erskine almost persuaded Steve to lay down the pistol, but Helmut Zemo, who had been acting as Steve's handler throughout the mission, did the job. Zemo took all of Erskine's information directly from his head using a technology invented by Fenhoff. After that, the Allies made a pact with imprisoned Hydra physicist Arnim Zola to continue Erskine's research, because they were so far along with it anyway. However, Zola continued to secretly support Hydra. Project Rebirth eventually boosted Steve to the pinnacle of the human form, and by 1942, he had joined the Allies' war effort as Captain America. Of course, Steve remained faithful to Hydra and worked as a spy, informing Hydra on army deployments, supply lines, and even a new unknown superweapon. Soon, Helmut was captured and imprisoned, and his father, Hydra's commander, Baron Heinrich Zemo, was killed in an invader raid on Hydra in 1944. Steve pursued Elisa with the purpose of killing her on instructions from Hydra, who felt she was the traitor who gave the Allies information about the Zemo's activities. Elisa guided Steve to the Red Skull, the Nazi commander whose intrigues, including the assassination of Heinrich Zemo, enabled him to seize the leadership of Hydra and effectively incorporate it into the Nazi Party. Over the next year, Captain America pursued the Red Skull until ultimately encountering him in Berlin. The Red Skull compelled Steve to promise fealty to him by using Zemo as leverage. Frustrated and dejected, Steve prepared to quit the battlefield until Elisa notified him of the Allies' new superweapon, the Cosmic Cube. Cosmic Cube. To prepare Steve for a last mission, Elisa led him back to the keep, and he was reunited with his mother, whose brain injury had prevented her from seeing Steve all these years. In preparation for the expedition, Elisa cautioned Steve about the Cosmic Cube's reality warping powers, indicating that the Allies intended to use it to reshape reality to win the war. Elisa used her clairvoyant talents to ensure that Steve survived the shift and awoke decades later in the New World, assigning him the duty of restoring the world to its original state. After releasing Helmut and taking the blueprints for the Allied drone rocket that killed Baron Zemo, Captain America headed to the historic Japanese city of Ashomia, where he met the Kraken, Isaac Newton, and Nostradamus. The latter informed Steve about his destiny and the sequence of circumstances that would enable his reappearance in this altered world. When it became apparent that the Allies were using the Cosmic Cube, Steve dove into Nostradamus' pawn to protect himself from the warping reality. By doing this, the reality was altered such that Hydra didn't win World War II, and Steve Rogers never worked for Hydra. Captain America would really freeze in ice while fighting alongside the Allies, only to be thawed in the 21st century by the superhuman group known as the Avengers, joining their ranks. In actuality, everything went on as it would have until Kobik managed to convince everyone that the other reality she created, in which Captain America worked for Hydra, was the real one. The Second Civil War. Both Red Skull and Rogers were forced to halt their Hydra missions due to the advent of Ulysses Kane, an inhuman with the ability to foretell the future. Rogers planted the seeds that led to Bruce Banner being killed over a prediction in order to assess Ulysses' powers and see if the emergence of more challenging threats for him to predict could be used to conceal his own schemes, which in turn escalated the tension between Captain Marvel and Iron Man, to intensify into a war that split the superhero community, leading to the Second Civil War in the Marvel Universe. In an unexpected change of events, Captain America became the main character in another of Ulysses' visions, in which he was slain by Spider-Man on the steps of the Capitol building. As a result, Captain America traveled to Washington, D.C. with Spider-Man to disprove the vision, and he watched the final fight between Iron Man and Captain Marvel. Rogers' belief was strengthened by Ulysses' vision, including him. Even though the premonition showed him dying at the hands of Spider-Man, he was able to catch a peek at the situation surrounding his presumed death, that of an America under Hydra's dominion. The S.H.I.E.L.D. Act. Next, as seen in Captain America Steve Rogers, issue 10, Captain America obtained extraterrestrial eggs harboring Chitauri queens under the instructions of the Red Skull. The presence of the eggs on Earth, along with their impulses and simple-mindedness, caused waves of these aliens to overrun the planet regularly, with each wave expanding in size and frequency. The Red Skull's ultimate goal was for these aliens to overwhelm and destabilize the Earth. Taking advantage of the Red Skull's Hydra's revival, Captain America joined Sharon Carter in recommending the Senate the formation of the S.H.I.E.L.D. Act to increase the organization's power. Not long after that, S.H.I.E.L.D. head Maria Hill faced a tribunal to evaluate her career's destiny, owing to several contentious choices, including the establishment of Pleasant Hill. Captain America engineered the killing of tribunal member Charles Dalton to ensure Hill got fired after she revealed the schematics for the impenetrable planetary defense shield in a bid to influence the World Security Council tribunal in her favor. As a result, Hill fled and turned over the planetary defense shield designs to the Alpha Flight space program. Rogers tried to dissuade Alpha Flight commander Captain Marvel from developing the shield since it may jeopardize the success of the Chitauri wave. However, Carol continued to support its establishment to the President of the United States, and she secured the building of its generator. After failing to stop the shield's development, Steve had his friend and hacker Rick Jones breach its security systems and then transmit its access codes to him. Captain America proposed Sharon Carter to replace Maria Hill, but she herself rejected and preferred Steve. Rogers' appointment as director coincided with the passage of the S.H.I.E.L.D. Act, which received bipartisan support in Congress. The S.H.I.E.L.D. Act significantly increased S.H.I.E.L.D.'s jurisdiction within the United States in areas such as police departments, mass surveillance, and allocation of resources, allowing the agency to serve as the de facto top law enforcement officers in the case of a national state of emergency. It even permitted the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. to seize complete control of the country in the event of a national emergency. Army of Evil and the arrival of the Chitauri wave. Once Baron Zemo was on Rogers' side, he proceeded to gather all of the supervillains in Pleasant Hill, forming an army of evil. In addition, Elisa Sinclair reappeared as the new Madam Hydra, gathering formidable supporters to serve as Captain America's ruling council of Hydra. Following his defeat at the hands of the Avengers Unity Division, the Red Skull had a chunk of Charles Xavier's brain surgically excised from his own cranium. Rogers planned Red Skull's breakout from jail simply to murder him himself, now that the Skull lacked the telepathic skills provided to him by Xavier's brain. After the Red Skull's death, Rogers cemented control as the new Hydra Supreme and reunited with Sinclair. After that, Baron Zemo acquired Kobik after taking over the Thunderbolts and supposedly murdering the Winter Soldier. However, Kobik's humanoid form was shattered during the process, leaving only cosmic cube shards behind. Selvig had a change of heart and transported the pieces away, dispersing them all across the planet prior to executing himself, before the cube could be rebuilt and used to modify the world to meet Rogers' chronology. With the impending advent of a Chitauri wave of billions of aliens, two new crises were put in motion: the Army of Evil's invasion of Manhattan and the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier Crescent disappearing from radar. Each of these crises was designed to destabilize crucial components of America's military. Dr. Faustus had brainwashed the crew of the Crescent, and making contact with S.H.I.E.L.D. allowed his hypnotic message to reach the organization's entire fleet. The Chitauri assault necessitated the superhero community's strongest hitters to keep them off in orbit, and Rogers then walled them off with the planetary defense shield. And ultimately, the Army of Evil's invasion was carried out to lure many of the country's heroes to Manhattan, so that Blackout could trap them in a dome of Darkforce. The S.H.I.E.L.D. Act's provisions were also implemented under the state of emergency, giving Captain America complete control over the government and military. After these attacks, Captain America gathered the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. fleet to seize control of Washington, D.C. and the nation. A group of America's heroes, who had not yet been eliminated, tried to thwart the coup, but were quickly routed. Secret Empire. The American people were becoming used to their new fascist government after Hydra's invasion, mainly due to the introduction of mind-altering drugs and water supplies to encourage docility and receptivity. Inhumans were imprisoned in detention centers, while mutants were sent to the independent nation of New Tian. A few heroes who hadn't been exiled joined the Underground, an organization of superhuman and civilian rebels commanded by Hawkeye, stationed atop the Mount in Nevada. Other heroes who had fallen under Hydra's control joined Hydra's own Avengers. Sounds like a complete nightmare, right? In the 2017 comic book series titled Secret Empire, the High Council forced Captain America to lay siege on Las Vegas, since there was an increase in underground activity nearby. Due to his uncertainty, Steve granted Madam Hydra the authority to carry out the attack, which she accomplished. Rogers was upset by this occurrence and went out to collect the Cosmic Cube shards so that the planet may be changed as quickly as possible. However, the rebels had also learned of the pieces' existence and were hoping to use them to restore Captain America to normalcy, so Hydra set out in a race against the Underground to get them. The majority of the pieces were finally collected by Hydra, who even attacked the Underground's base to take the two remaining shards. Following their victory, during a ceremony at the Capitol building, Captain America was assaulted by the Red Room, another rebel group. This group was commanded by Black Widow and had Spider-Man in its ranks. Black Widow had planned to assassinate Captain America to stop Spider-Man's transformation into a murderer, which was part of Ulysses Kane's vision. Black Widow tried to break up the battle when Spider-Man approached Captain America after she attempted to hold him at bay and failed, but she was mortally struck by Rogers' S.H.I.E.L.D. as the youthful hero tried to stop running from his alleged doom. Steve was more and more shocked by Natasha's passing since it increased the number of uninvited victims of his cause. As a result, Rogers became determined to complete the Cosmic Cube's construction and took steps to get the two components that eluded him. Those were held by Emma Frost in New Tian and Black Panther in Wakanda. T'Challa was taken prisoner, and Frost was made to give up after Hydra waged war on these countries. When they discovered the final cube shard, the Underground gathered momentum and exploited its residual reality warping abilities to shape the events that led to the destruction of the Planetary Defense Shield and the Dark Force Dome. Finally reunited, a group made up of practically every single superhero launched an effective assault on Washington, D.C. Despite the destruction of Hydra's armies, the Hydra Supreme approached the heroes wearing armor that gave him access to the power of the shards he was holding. This power was sufficient for him to remake reality in Hydra's likeness. After that, Steve got ready to piece the cube back together after receiving the last piece from Sam Wilson. However, with Ant-Man's assistance, the Winter Soldiers subatomically got inside the cube. This action gave Bucky access to Kobik's mind space and allowed him to summon the actual Steve Rogers, who manifested in front of his fascist doppelganger. The two Captain Americas engaged in combat when Kobik reversed the effects of the Hydra Supreme's alteration of reality. The evil Steve Rogers was ultimately vanquished after a difficult battle. The heroes prevailed, and over the course of the ensuing weeks, life, as usual, was restored in the United States. After his defeat, the evil Steve Rogers was imprisoned in the Shadow Pillar, a high-security institution. But, of course, he had surreptitiously employed at least one Hydra loyalist as a guard. The Supreme Commander's initial attempt to escape was aided by Baron Zemo, who had maintained Hydra's functioning after Rogers' fall. The fleeing vigilante was stopped by another vigilante who had been duped by Rogers, the Punisher, who had taken the War Machine armor and intended to use it against Hydra. The Punisher destroyed Hydra's getaway chopper and vanquished Baron Zemo. Rogers was captured once more when the authorities arrived. Rogers was eventually pardoned by the President of the United States via the Power Elite, who had begun feeding a campaign of misinformation to lead the public into believing that this Captain America was genuinely the Supreme Leader all along, queuing up with Rogers' detainment for the alleged murder of Thaddeus Ross. However, Selene Gallio attacked him as he was leaving the Shadow Pillar with Alexa Lukin, shattering his leg and melting his body. As his corpse erupted into flames, the Supreme Leader wailed in agony as he tried to chant Hydra's mantra in a puddle of his own blood. Hydra Supreme powers and abilities. Given that the only difference between Hydra Supreme and the original Captain America is their altered backgrounds, it makes it reasonable to presume he has the same powers as his previous self. Steve's physical and mental powers are perfected and evolved to the level way beyond that of an ordinary human, giving him incredible power, quickness, endurance, reflexes, stamina, sturdiness, dexterity, and an enhanced healing factor. He also has the same unbreakable willpower. In short, he is the OG Master Chief. Captain America vs. Hydra Supreme. If both the Steve Rogerses engaged in an MMA-style bout, we believe a draw would be the only possible outcome because they are practically the same guy. However, Hydra Supreme was wicked and had a penchant for killing, whereas the benevolent Steve Rogers was always cautious and held back his blows. This causes us to assume that if they ever had a one-on-one battle, Hydra Supreme would win just because of this one aspect. We mean, sure, Cap could have taken down Iron Man alone if he tried enough, but Hydra Supreme took down the entire Avengers single-handedly, making him more dangerous. Marvelous verdict. Hydra Supreme thinks that Hydra's collectivist dictatorial ruling, in which power and authority are defined by might and brutality, would make the world a better place. He understands that sacrifices must be made to attain his aim, and he has committed many atrocities to realize his ambitions. This involves allowing Madam Hydra to slaughter millions of people while assaulting Las Vegas. This proves he is a Thanos-level threat, and we can only be thankful that the original Steve Rogers is back and the evil one is dead, at least for now. Otherwise, the future of the Avengers would have been in serious jeopardy. That's all for now, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This has been Corey Whelan for Marvelous Videos. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.